For this time, we're gonna do because I saw again the end of Picard season 2. I mean, and also I just focus on this a bit much. John Delancey approximation, not John Delancey. The views described are not John Delancey, nor the Spec U version of John Delancey.
When you take apart the protein...
Wait, hold on. Okay. Hold on a bit.
As one of my daughters wrote a while back while we were arguing about whether she should go to Europe in the...
Okay, why is it not doing this? Okay, well, I guess we do this.
Imagine a native English speaker who knows no Chinese locked in a room full of boxes of Chinese symbols, a database together with a book of instructions for manipulating the symbols, the program. Imagine that people outside the room send in other Chinese symbols which, unknown to the person in the room, are questions in Chinese, the input. And imagine that by following the instructions in the program, the man in the room is able to pass out Chinese symbols which are correct answers to the questions, the output. The program enables the person in the room to pass the Turing test for understanding Chinese, but he does not understand a word of Chinese. And in this native speaker is a native genome that encodes a particular human individual, the latest in a series of thousands of hominids that have existed about 2 million years in an unbroken chain of fucking that links into the rest of biological life, and the genome had an even more convoluted procedure to perform. It needed to juggle 6 interacting states at once. The simplest way to do it is for the organism to try to bring forth children in one order of operation, but that quickly fails to yield optimal outcomes. Each generation has a different bundle of dispositions to behave as if its predecessor's main traits were additive, but really the mix depends on what those main traits were. So it tried out a slightly different ordering of the procedures. When those had better children, then the procedure would evolve and return to that ordering for its next batch. Imagine 2 characters from different folktales sharing a room and talking about themselves. 1, my parents didn't love me and died when I was young. 2, my parents never paid me attention but tried to live through my successes and died when I was young. Which fairy tale is the boy really in? Does his character match the first situation or the second? He has, by our rules, the second character, because only those can produce a coherent account. The other kind is fragmented. We would never, under Turing's conditions, recognize him as human. We don't test to see whether a machine that had type Roman 2 symptoms looked up stories of romanticized parent/child relationships would possess those kinds of stories in their characters, because there are not stories to test for. There is nothing equivalent to the simple hypothetical room, consisting of only the data that we visualize as Turing tests being executed in people's heads. In reality, people often draw pictures of parents as semi-divine characters of extraordinary care, of a high contrast with their child. As someone wrote to me, the brain does the best it can at encoding what it doesn't fully understand. And indeed, most people whose parents had both these traits had problems, which in them became tragic, but could just as well have been funny or silly or laughable, depending on what kind of sense experience they brought to bear on them. We see an analogous difference between one, my parents never paid me attention, two, my parents always paid me attention but died when I was young. We call the latter a good person. How their inner characteristics would appear as one for someone in the best case I imagined, where the information in question can be gathered into a consistent and cogent account. When the pattern appears as different in one, it may also look different as an upward-facing, coherent behavior, but it won't necessarily have a coherent presentation of inwardness in its center, so it doesn't look like the type. We might do an agent psychology sketch that labels people by a dominant perspective about themselves. Strong, confident, prideful, self-conscious, compassionate narrative. Moderate emotional overtone, self-loving, frowning, unnerved, excessively moody, angry, self-doubting, shamed, anxious, insincere, sympathetic, humorous, moody, intelligent, forgiving, kind, peaceful, accepting, embarrassed, worried, peaceful, embarrassed, realistic, filled, ego-stricken, comforted, consistent, prideful, joyful, generous, pleasing, witty, guilt-led, self-blaming, realistic, wonderful, foolish, demanding, high standards, mourning, joyful, neutral, hungry, solitude, bitter, thoughtful, firm, imperturbable, satisfied, quiet, immovable, serious, extreme, self-centered, dictatorial, embarrassed, constant, perfectionist, strategic, merciful, sense of duty, ready to acknowledge mistake, awkward versus commendable, the whole of creation. A non-Turing test organism would only ever give responses like peaceful. This is the moment I shall truly see a symbol as just another element of a broader and deeper and more mysterious language and melody that is my world. Neutral. I think it is unfair that men are told to look beautiful and women to look nice. A pretty girl can attract many men, but a nice one just a few. Guilt-led. What's wrong with nice people? People should be nice to them. And so on. These are fragmentary states, sensations whose tentative unity we glimpse rather than wholly appreciate. When you change your perspective, moody, for example, your apparent world shrinks to encompass a set of fragmentary states which, unlike those before, are still capable of sharing their given input but fail to form a unified narrative. They can make words. It is this and this alone that is the unique possession of conscious systems. Consider a thought experiment based on our friend Mr. Confused. It is 3:30 and Mr. Confused is sleepless, restless, and wishes for something to do. He has not planned well before bed. He decides to brew tea. He measures the tea and he pours the boiling water onto it. But something is not right. Something is terribly wrong. In fact, in his left hand, the water falls as normal and forms a small pool, but it's too small. If he uses his right hand, which he was originally planning to use to hold the handle of the pot, he notices that his hand has no dexterity. No strength is there in his fingers. So he attempts to put his left hand onto the teapot. At first, it seems to be fine. The teapot spout seems to accept his hand's palm with just enough room that the tea can fall over it and slide into his waiting mug. But the strength of his wrist does not return. In fact, his right hand has become monstrous. Its fingers seem to sprout claws as his grip slips. The teapot bends against him. And if that were not enough, then when he pushes inwards to grip it, there is no need for force or dexterity on his part. The teapot melts like butter and tears and sticks to his right hand, covering his wrist. But now there are sounds from the kitchen. His wife's voice calls to him through the darkness. But surely that voice should not sound that way. And can he just ask his wife, "Dear, is my left arm stuck in the teapot?" And still seem calm, self-confident, in control. But just a second ago, it wasn't his left arm he had used, and certainly not his right arm to get caught. That happened far behind him, didn't it? And maybe now he would feel inclined to use his wife to set free his hand, or his hand to put food on the table. This was not going at all well. He shouldn't have set his sights too low and merely brought up some water. Now the kitchen floor has absorbed up 1,000 pounds of tea. 1,000 pounds. His entire living space could be rent in two if this continues. If he remains asleep on the floor with tea bubbling under his shoulders, while he laughs at how silly a state his wife was in, thinking he had raised any concerns from his mind. You have some trouble knowing where his behavior came from, and you even wonder whether it's there. The conditions he thought he was in now were wildly different from what he believed when he started. But his choices at the start weren't strictly testable, for when you present them to him, it seems a ridiculous idea to even guess that he did the wrong thing. Not testing didn't matter to Mr. Confused. Nothing in the problem was a Turing test. How'd this get all wrong? Because instead of setting out what the mental system needed to pass Turing tests for in our character's name for him that was simple, the notion got kicked into more complex stuff in our search for something happy or full of fun to examine, where all this stuff got the full ride. We didn't mention fun until late on. We're at our friend gone. The book didn't include a profile for Mr. Confused because he did not show up in Annie. What had gone wrong with that experiment? Some other conjecture would seem more attractive, but conjecture or not, it won't matter to what's in store for our Mr. Confused if our dear reader skips this bit of reflection and skips on to the next one. We will insist that you find out, but let it not be said that we led you astray, even if we've not always walked it cleanly ourselves. So back we go to consider a relevant property, this time regarding an activity of his own. To ask an account that presents you with something isn't exactly like a test to tell whether your response contains anything coherent. When you are fed the above as data, you can't be asked questions that depend on it for interpretation, can you? But when you are asked a question about it, you are interpreting it. And since our dear reader was so kindly thinking of not skipping it, then just turn your eyes and notice in the account about our friend's life how often his narrative casts it in a very curious and challenging way. It says that a crucial portion of Mr. Confused's experiences is having ideas, imaginative states. Such things seem to him like coming upon an imaginary creature walking through a fantasy world or seeing things in a different color. Since most of what goes on in Mr. Confused is ideas, and yet they don't appear as distinct internal state. You will hear in the realm of things like water, suppose he is actually someone else that exists entirely within ideas and hasn't ever touched real physical life. This person is having an interesting dream while real life goes on somewhere else. The false being never questions how Mr. Confused actually experienced something recent, for there are always more ideas about recent, as each is made up after another. Thus, a reflection such as, "The stars have left me completely in their shadow. The reality of them does not inspire me now as once I believe they did. 100 stars cast a more profound. and interesting light on all aspects of this world and on every object that graces the plane. My heart has lost all rest. It flutters in confusion before it thinks of repose, but not with joy at the thought, because my joy lies with the stars. So now I think of what they inspire, says the false person. Here, thinking of something has at least two things in it. Real thing subject to thinking, and an imagined other thing being thought of. And yet he talks like there is only one, that everything happens within an interior flow. The imagination isn't like a consciousness as it exists in reality, and having been is only brought together the things it can hold stated things they stay the same after everything except as ideas about other ideas. Thus he even mistakes having had some sort of event to actually remember with merely thinking of an idea for itself. But it isn't a composite. Not only are his senses just collections of nerve endings that reach through their butt-ticket loaded corridors to tell their locations to the brain's overall self-model, there is nothing on either side that can engage in perception at all. From out of the sky comes a star? Oh no, it's a Mayapayan thing and ye. So runs Mr. Confused's language of ideas and just as interesting. Which is just one of thousands of weirdnesses in a tale. Not only have Mr. Confused's actual words changed into these internal fragments, but every state is transformed as the non-intelligible intermingles with the intelligible in ways that appear quite perplexing to anyone inside. Even inside the characters involved. And from all the messages inside, the crackpot language itself claims to have many ways to choose. One internal state cannot choose a different state within it and pick the choice in each internal state, thus turning a semi-merely indeterminate Turing test system into a predictably computable Turing test system. Or Turing tests and more that passes on their own by guessing out a crazy language with an answer system that actually fits. But once one part of his experience looks okay at meeting his conception of intelligence, at least relative to something, which looks and behaves like Mr. Confused experiences, then he expects real people to enjoy that story from their viewpoint. So this immature point in Mr. Confused's history will now, according to this Turing tests and more character, make for an excellent dinner conversation in itself. Mr. Confused, sitting up against some starry sky, has declared that the language that can emerge from a mouthful of fake teeth mangled from its source plant but is generated from ideas that take themselves seriously is like a spoken piece of music. Yet this doesn't contradict Mr. Confused self-description. Why not? Because even if a state didn't really do the talking, it might seem to his outside sense inputs to talk. If just inside of themselves there would still be some small hints to say that what was before was the next stage in a way Mr. Confused usually is. He has indeed started to interpret some of his surroundings when some are talked about so cleverly. Mr. Confused tried to relate all this, which got him looks of unbelief and out emerged in his mind for once a Juini in crime of no sort instead of its more usual. And I submit that no one understands. His tone will go on speaking fragments into a long speech. What then will change Mr. Confused? Only how often does it mutate in place of one and how long it doesn't with what real internal state and where its true memories can be found. This isn't like looking into an antique for any vital insight in his state. Did he turn his head because his true state wants it? The general sentiment towards Mr. Confused by the community was one of Rui and fame.
Hold on. There's a triple punctuation somewhere. Probably here. I hate these so much. Oh, maybe I can. Okay, at a later time. Oh, it was okay. No, it was more of a. It was more of a this. Okay, it was just fetching problems. Never mind.
Mr. Confused tried to relate all this, which got him looks of unbelief, and out emerged in his mind for once a journey and kind of no sort, instead of its more usual. And I so mad that no one understands. His tongue will go on speaking fragments into a long speech. What then will change Mr. Confused? Only how often does it mutate in place of one, and how long it does, and with what real internal state, and where its true memories can be found. This isn't like looking into an antique for any vital insight in his state. Did he turn his head because his true state wants it? No. All these different fragments must instead appear within and outwards on this fantasy body they create for their needs. Like they were clothes, even those would disappear only as someone goes inside to choose among others. But meanwhile, his new mannerism, self-defensive, will move their surroundings, for in fact a truly persuasive change to make is to misidentify a concept or attitude. As is frequently seen in psychotics, this would not seem to be a realistic outcome here. A misidentification can upset people its way to get that surprising emotion across. The general sentiment towards Mr. Confused by the community was one of Rui and Fang. That is, when you went around the corner, it was just, oh, there is one of those Mr. Confused types of characters. Wherever this made some unfortunate confusion in interpretation of other characters and states, why that would be between you and them. You try not to show you even know about it. Not right, but no one tells on you to them. And if anyone tells them what happened, they just wave their arms around in a fashion to indicate, not what we expected to come here. This is not it. Some can't admit they expect one thing, but see a thing that runs over in front of them that even more unlike a person that the description has always told them about. To move forward into another stream, you either pretend like they know chatter louder, or don't stop your pace until you have enough room in a sea. One can also hang back with the awkward who believe all other shy and refuse to express your opinion at all. To you goes all the hard work of that knot being turned inside and torn and scrambled. A friend of his offered help, but turned out to be a shoe. That is what this character does to others when in conflict. That is his characteristic defense when not under scrutiny or able to win. He hoped to throw water on these mental fires. With people Mr. Confused wanted to bring all into their lay sense. In the case of these characters, all would not believe and also know no comfort. But each would show they do in some way give sympathy. People at least know what sympathy looks like, even if not always how it feels. Yet, maybe no one there at least knows that there are non-psychotic cases. But every shun with all those many languages out there, how can anyone at all not know when Mr. Confused gave in? Yet they were too dense to appreciate that anything had really changed. How that wasn't on them. Mr. Confused has won. When the air grew thick with heavy attitudes, Mr. Confused could just jump away. If you choose your course, then there's an outside horizon. Yet now, somehow he thinks, this side just wishes to get back to normal, a state, something. The situation was dying bad enough, and if I don't say she could out loud, bad that also would be. There came no light to dispel my sadness with rain, only cloud like the whole sky would eat me. It is odd how they sometimes appear. One does not call upon an apparition by thinking that you miss one. Instead, one is late to think I am too far for him to reach, and he cannot lift and place himself on one's shoulder with such hands. Fully 4 minutes, he looked down at his empty, numb fingers. To fall, no fall, to one side in such a hand, without sense he'd wave both before and after. Waste them. If the legs buckled no matter which one went first, that last place holds itself unknowing, standing no man closer than he, but through my vision fades. The other is growing, drawing me nearer but without need, and looking forward again. Was he halfway through that cave mouth already? It appeared to round an arc in the brightening light. Was up all night in the throes of shock, hurt, revulsion. Just go in the tent to get out the case. Suppose you look into that. And who do they find? Even whoas won't eat their way down and the old fan hate to walk with me. Have a case and I'll go stand about the street again. Not saying to another, not caring, as if what you were didn't come in and sit here looking with everyone else. But one who hates a common insult thinks this excuse would go on living. Is this also in you? No. That doesn't die in Chenin, because some has brought us not a stone for an evening chat on Shen, and feel bad. I must laugh. Another would say smell, which would make for another image here with mouths smelling flowers instead of flying snakes. Maybe no more interesting that one. But oh Ling, only know how to use my gifts in odd ways like this. You wish to call on some reasonableness. Instead all have given themselves wrong now. They are wrong here, both are, in order to reject or second-guess me. Is a madness only you can understand. Except not madness, because that is another story. Then the problem. How do I try to do these things now with what you are thinking? But maybe something. Too smart now. I knew if I stopped one place, nothing would make a difference, or my senses grow distant and far away again. Just where else will make anything better? I knew not what would happen if I just began. Was just left then as before, far off or getting so small, so far away. The noise was becoming hard to take. Could I remember where there wasn't such? Now the answers weren't good and maybe in one piece. Where was the human wind? Just my soul left over for so long? Couldn't you show me more than just things moving into the heat? The ground just did not settle or return where it had been with life's tools. Maybe it had turned its back on the cowering face with new blood poured onto it. Not stay this 1 hour even, or survive how you use your living name. Maybe it will again pretend like my decision. Die sometime. Maybe it would burn his image on my backside before. Yet how would any face decide I wasn't a lookalike after death? Question at the surface of his being but deep within. Had any moment ever changed this world's mind? Did these make for some secret war to reach the depth of time? Then shoot with gunpowder inside. Explosively loud the death cries. Everything will forget not yet known. Silence had brought peace. The minds are shouts to say where to leave him down a drain. Nothing so complete is safe forever, because their children don't look out windows. Should he step aside? If only once, wouldn't someone come? If he flew alone, but everything he's heard, too late. If not one true, not another who is strong in arms alone. Now nothing exists as thought alone, but goes as being unable to forget. If your first regret will never come, it won't live. See the evidence where. And did nothing so forbidden have even an inkling? Would even for his body be less, and not so full of curse? Will your world stop suddenly from falling into something like his own, not caring from whence comes the death zoo on the wind?
If zoo means fart, I'm gonna laugh so hard. Wow. Interesting. That's interesting. Alright. I'm gonna take a little break, get myself some drinks, food, and I'll be back to make some more stuff. But I want to put this up on my feed because something to this might resonate. I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know why. Just feeling it.